Hello, everyone, and welcome to Focus on the Family today. We have a very important topic with us today. So, we are continuing on our theme for focusing on our children. So, as you know, we've been on this journey for about 7 to 8 months, I believe. So, we started with understanding ourselves, understanding our spouses, and then we moved on to our children. So, for today, we're talking about a topic of Christianity and the Christian faith, the core of it. And it's we called it the case for Christ based on a book that I'm going to mention in a minute. But essentially, why did we do that? Is because we all face kind of these questions in our potentially in our day-to-day life and interacting with others. There's lots of trends to say Christianity, is the faith has strong foundation. A lot of people saying no, Christ wasn't really the Son of God, and so on and so forth, and that faith is not founded, and so on and so forth. Um, One thing is we shouldn't treat those as threats or be defensive or fearful of them, but we do need to model um, what we truly believe in and we understand, and we need to have some answers to those um, questions coming back to us in a very obviously again non-fearful and educating way as well. Like if we arm ourselves with proper apologetics, then we can help people see Christianity for what it is. So that is very important. So in order to do this for our kids, we need to model it ourselves first. So this is why we're doing this topic today, and the key to this topic is is really the resurrection of Christ. So because the question of whether Christ was alive or not is not debated at all. Everybody's recognizing Christ was there. Some people say he was a thought leader. Some people say he was a great spiritual leader. Some people say he was not truthful in his claims about being the Son of God. But nobody at all disputes that Christ was here, and he was an important figure. And the thing that differentiates Christianity from other views is the resurrection of Christ, and that's the core of the faith. So, what the book here? So the book is called "The Case for Christ," and it's by Lee Strobel. And you can get the book and whatnot. It has a lot of good details on what I'm going to share with you today, um, and it really focuses on proving the resurrection of Christ with evidence. So Lee Strobel was a legal journalist and legal editor in the Chicago Tribune, um, and he was an atheist, and he decided to as part of his work, he takes legal cases and he looks at the evidence for them and makes a case, either this case is strong or not. So he decided to apply the same thing to the story of Christ, and specifically the resurrection. So he took it and went and looked for evidence and whatnot. And this is what we're going to share today. And Lee Strobel is now a Christian, a believer. I'm going to share a video at the end of this uh, presentation so that you can go and take a look at his story, how he turned into a Christian, what he was thinking before, and how that changed him. So without further ado, let's look at the four components of what Lee Strobel focused on. He was actually trying to prove that Christianity um, is not founded on strong evidence. So to prove or disprove Christ's resurrection, he looked at four things: execution, early accounts, empty tomb, and eyewitnesses. So the presentation that I'm going to go through today is not meant to cover the full detail of what Lee Strobel captured. It's just meant to just give you a sense of it and gives you some talking points, some ideas to talk with your kids, age appropriate. So it's use your judgment there, but it just gives us a little bit more of the apologetics behind it as well. So so we're going to dive into each of those pillars and talk about them. So first pillar being the execution. So was Christ actually dead? Is the first piece to this, right? And um, multiple sources, not just inside the Bible but outside of the Bible, confirms the death of Jesus Christ. And I've listed a bunch of them. There are many historians, but more importantly, I think one of the interesting ones is the very last one by Gerd Ludemann, who is a atheist as well. And he mentioned Jesus's death as a consequence of crucifixion is indisputable. So Jesus, so we mentioned that the existence of Jesus obviously is not disputed at all. The death of Jesus is not disputed as well. Even the Jews and some of, like, there's lots of views on the Jew community right now that says, well, yeah, Jesus died, but we weren't, like, the Jews are not to blame for that. It was more the Romans. Regardless, it is just confirming the fact that Jesus was dead. So that's the first pillar, that the execution actually happened. Christ did die of crucifixion in the cross. So that gives us the kind of first tick box on Christ was dead. So the second is early accounts of the resurrection. So the idea here is, typically, if the resurrection was a legend, legends don't form very quickly, and that's based on historical examples. Like we have Alexander the Great, and the first biographies were 400 years after his time. And no legends have kind of early accounts of what actually happened. So it's more of a breaking news rather than a legend. So early accounts include the creed of the earliest Christians, which was developed within 20 years. That's kind of uh, uh, one estimate based on St. Paul's letter to in First Corinthians, which I'm going to show in the next slide. That says that, because that letter was around 25 years maybe, but Paul mentioned that it was given to him. So we can safely say it's dated within 20 years of the resurrection of Jesus Christ. And there's another evidence as well that even says, from James D.G. Dunn, who was a New Testament scholar, and he mentioned that this tradition, which is meant to say the creed, and again, you could look this up, we can be entirely confident was formulated as a tradition within months of the death of Jesus. So again, if it was a legend, why did it come up so quickly and so boldly, close to the events of Jesus dying? So this is the early accounts, and this is the what I mentioned, First Corinthians, and it says here, "For I delivered to you first of all that which I also received," and then he mentions the creed. So, which I also received means, again, that Paul has been taught this before he started preaching it. So, which means it's dated before this. So again, the fact that it's mentioned very close to the event negates the fact that it's a legend, but it's more of a something that happened and people started reporting on it right away. In this creed as well, you'll see people named in terms of witnesses, and we'll talk about witnesses in a bit right now. So that's the early accounts. The news was soon after his death and resurrection. Jesus' death and resurrection. Next is the empty tomb. And there are a lot of folks that say, was the body even ever in it? Because some say that crucified bodies were never buried, but there was evidence found, and again, Lee Strobel kind of lists those in the book. Found that crucified people were buried. Some crucified people were buried, so that kind of negates that. Enemies of Jesus admitted it. Sources from inside and outside um, said that the enemies of Jesus said that the disciples stole it, or there are so many theories out there of what happened, but none of them. There was no reason for the Jews or the Romans at that time to ignore the claim of an empty tomb if it was false. The easiest thing they could have said is, well, let's open the tomb, here's the body, and that's done. And nobody would have believed any of the resurrection theories or news, or however you want to call it. It was as simple as, if the Jews and Romans believed that the tomb was not empty, they could have just simply um, proven it and be done with it. The fact that it's still kind of something that wasn't really tackled head on just leaves that as an open end as well. So last thing is the eyewitnesses, which again, there are numerous sources that look at eyewitnesses, but the key thing here is the disciples were in hiding and scared. And only a few weeks after Jesus rose, they started proclaiming very boldly, to the point that they were willing to die for the proclamation. So there's lots of evidence that talks about the conviction of the disciples that this happened, and the change, the dramatic change in what they thought first. First, they were fearful, and then they turned around and they said, they proclaimed that no, Jesus rose from the dead, and so on. These are two very drastic mindsets to shift from in either end. And there's also lots of talks around traditions in the past where the Joseph of Arimathea was one of the leaders in kind of, his family was one of the leaders in the Jew community, and it wasn't actually convincing for the disciples or anyone to say actually that Joseph was the one that went and asked for the body, because again, Joseph is the leader in the Jew community. So there's something that's not quite convincing to say no, they made the story up, because again, he was one of the Jews leaders. Why would he put himself out there and go ask for Jesus' body and bury it? So there's evidence there. So again, we covered those four pillars, but I think the main point here is reaching a verdict. So the point is not to completely say, okay, here's everything, and it's like people dispute a lot of evidence and look at a lot of evidence. Lee Strobel was an atheist, and he wanted to prove that Christ was not there from his own benefits, or not that the Christian belief is not true. So what he says in his own account, he says, I reached a point where there was so much evidence and things pointing at that I couldn't ignore Christ's resurrection or Christ and what he did. It was going to take him more faith to ignore a lot of things rather than have faith and believe in God. And the key point here is having faith, because at the end of the day, there is a component of faith in our belief in Jesus Christ, and it's all about looking at all of these together. The other big question is, why would the disciples even go through that? Christianity was never kind of built as this kind of glorious thing in early ages when near the time when Christ resurrected. It was all around um, suffering and persecution. Why would people go through that if that wasn't a thing? And what are they claiming, or what are they striving for? Is what Christ taught, which is love your enemies, um, uh, don't judge, turn your left cheek or your right cheek. It's just all of these aspects um, are not something that Jesus was not kind of proclaiming any glory or anything like that. He was actually saying, um, uh, spread love and spread love across the world. Love your neighbors, like all of these things. Why would people be kind of willing to die for this? So again, you have to reach a verdict. You have to reach that verdict within you. And last thing I'll share is Lee Strobel's link to his video, one of his videos that he talks about his story. He talks about what he has found, and what happened to him, how he was, how he changed, and how his family changed as well when he changed too. So encourage you, and even Lee Strobel says, go investigate for yourself. I did that. So Lee Strobel says he did that, and he went and investigated for himself, and that's what he reached. So he encourages people to go investigate as well and find for themselves, which is a very telling um, a story or a very telling statement that he's very confident in what he found. So thank you very much for listening in today. If you have any thoughts, questions, or comments, please send us on the email, and we'll talk to you next week. Thank you very much.